Welcome everyone, I am the Depressed Eeyore, and I figured I'd go over Danmaku. I did a video on this a long time ago. Danmaku is a fighting slash hidden role game that's played with 4 to 8 players. Obviously I'm by myself, but this is more just to educate you guys on how it's played and just to show it off in general. I don't think I'll be doing a full playthrough. I don't really know. I'll see how I feel as I go along this. I'm kind of going. I have the rules in front of me right now. There is an actual physical version of this. If you go to obviously this site here, you can get you can possibly order it or something like that. I don't know anything about that. I haven't really ordered it yet. But they do have a save file that has all this set up already. It recently got updated, it looks like, because these aren't the same images as before. But this is not an actual tabletop simulator module, unfortunately. At least I haven't seen it. I haven't checked recently. But there's a group, there's a Steam group that's specifically for this game, and in there there'll be a link that has a save file that you can just copy and paste into your save folder and use to play this game. I'll try to remember to include a link to the group. The group is pretty much dead, but the links are still good, so you can at least get the game and possibly get your friends to play it. I've occasionally gotten invites for this game, but it's always been at times I cannot play. I was busy with other things. But yeah, so this game is, as mentioned, 4 to 8 players, which is probably the one thing that makes it very difficult to play. But and even if you have 4 people, you're really kind of missing out on a lot of the hidden roles that are available in this game. If you want a game that's similar as far as kind of the gameplay style, there's a game called Bang, the dice game, which is kind of a more Western, but Wild West sort of setting where you have like the sheriff and things like that. And this one, it's all based off Toho. You got the heroine, you got your partner, your stage bosses, and then of course your EX bosses. So the goal of this game really depends on what sort of role you get. And as far as the hidden roles go, the heroine will always start out revealed and everyone else will be hidden. So the only people that will have any information is who the heroine is, and that's about it. Of course, that can change depending on how many players there are. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is just kind of do things in order. I'm going to go ahead and play this with the mindset of a full 8-player game. So the first step we got to do for the setting up this game is actually getting the roll card set up. Now the roll cards are pretty straightforward. There are 2 quote-unquote heroine cards, though you generally only end up using one of them. You have 4 different partner cards. You have 6 different boss cards, and you actually have something's not right here. Let me check. Okay, yeah, so these get put away. Sorry about that. We'll go over those cards later. But then there's 2 EX bosses. Essentially an EX boss and a phantom boss. Now, if you look at the top right corner of oops, actually I did that wrong. EX boss, there it is. If you look at the top right corner where there's that little number 4, that represents the recommended number of players to actually use this card. So for example, even if you're playing a 4-player game, which consists of a heroine, 2 bosses, and an extra boss, you might notice that some of these boss cards actually have 5 as the recommended players. So you generally take these out ahead of time, and then you would shuffle the rest of them in, and then deal them out as normal. Same thing for like partners. Obviously, some of them require 5. One true partner requires 7, and then the rival is 8. So you kind of need a full house for that. And there you go. So as you can see, the card just states, some of them give you abilities. For example, the heroine actually makes you start with extra life and a max hand size. And it states your goal. So for the heroine, they have to defeat all the stage bosses and extra bosses. Pretty straightforward. That's exactly what you do in Toho. But if you play as the rival, your goal is actually to defeat the heroine, then defeat all the stage bosses and extra bosses. Because essentially the way the rival works is you kill the heroine and become the new heroine. Partners are generally designed to support a certain character, usually the heroine. So for example, a normal partner's goal is to defeat all the stage bosses and extra bosses while protecting the heroine. Now, if the partner gets defeated, the heroine will actually suffer some issues because obviously she was an ally. Then there's, of course, the EX mid-boss, which is essentially a partner that supports the EX boss. So defeat all the stage bosses, then defeat the heroine. And then there's the one true partner, whose goal is to defeat all other partners, then go for the rest of the stuff. Stage bosses are pretty much the most straightforward of the bunch, with the exception of the heroine. Stage bosses, or at least most of them, is just to defeat the heroine. Their goal is only the heroine, and they know who exactly that person is, because obviously the heroine is always revealed. The final boss, on the other hand, is they have to defeat the heroine after defeating a partner. So they have to defeat one of these partners if they're available. As you can see, this is why they have that 5 requirement there, because on a 4-player game, there are no partners. Challenger is you have to defeat the heroine after defeating the extra boss. And then for heroine, you have to defeat the heroine after defeating one other stage boss. And then for the extra bosses, both of them are pretty much the same. Phantom boss and EX boss have the same goal. The only difference between the two is they have a special ability where they can actually reveal themselves ahead of time, and when they reveal themselves, they'll actually get some bonuses. So, for example, if you reveal yourself as the EX boss, you pretty much become very much like a heroine. You get +1 max life, +1 hand size, and you draw an extra card during your draw step. Meanwhile, the true Phantom bosses, they only get +1 life, but then they can choose to skip incident steps and things like that. But we'll go into the incidents later. But the goal for both versions of the extra boss is they have to defeat all the stage bosses, then the heroine. So this is a situation where the extra bosses are actually allied with the heroine in order to make sure they defeat the bosses first before defeating the heroine. So in the beginning of the game, they'll generally try to... They might not necessarily support the heroine. They might let her get softened up and stuff, but they won't let her die. Because if that happens, that's game over. By the way, the game does end the moment the heroine is defeated or all bosses are defeated. So usually by then, some sort of victory requirement is met. Alright, so as mentioned, the game is played with 4 to 8 players. I'm going to go ahead and briefly go over what the setup is for each of the player counts. So you got 4 players, which is just going to include a heroine, at least 2 stage bosses, and they have to be regular stage bosses, and then either an EX boss or a Phantom boss, which I'll just stack them on top of each other like that. So this is the situation with a 4-player game. So the heroine has to deal with, in order for the heroine to win, she has to defeat the stage bosses and the EX boss. The stage bosses just need to kill the heroine. The EX boss has to defeat the bosses, then the heroine. So in this setup, it's essentially a 2-on-2 in the beginning, but the EX boss wants to win over the heroine. Now, when you get to 5 players, it becomes a little bit more interesting. You obviously get access to partners. So you can get, in this case, any of these versions of partners. So 1 partner. Also, you can now include potentially some of these other special boss cards. So for a 5-player game, it's one heroine, 2 bosses, but there's a chance you can get the special bosses now, and then a EX boss, and then a random partner, which also includes the EX mid boss. When you get to 6 players, oops, sorry, I forgot about the anti-heroine. With 6 players, you end up adding another boss, which it could be any setup here. It could be any combination. It could be 3 stage bosses. It could be It could be no stage bosses and be like a final boss, anti-heroine, and challenger. All right. Now 7 players is now 2 partners, which also adds in a potential of getting the 1 true partner. So this will be the setup here. You got 1 heroine, 3 bosses, an EX boss, 2 partners, and then the final setup, which we'll be setting up in a second, is heroine, 3 bosses, EX boss, 2 partners, and then the rival. So that's pretty much the setup. Now the way you do this, I'm going to use the 8-player as an example. You're going to put in, obviously, the ones that by themselves. In the case of the EX boss, what you do here, shuffle this, put 1 random EX boss in there. The other one gets put face down, away from everything. Oops. Take all these. We need 2 partners, so we're going to shuffle all the partners together. Draw out 2 partners. And then, of course, the last is... Hey, they actually shuffled. Alright, and then last, we shuffle all these and take out 3 of them. 1, 2, 3. Alright, so 8 cards. And that's all set up there. Alright. Now, you shuffle all these. And then you can just deal. Oh, it only goes to... Unfortunately, I have to do this by hand because there's no other players to deal out. Now, if there are multiple players, you should be able to just deal, and I'll just deal it all out face down. So we're just gonna... Whoop. I won't worry about that. Obviously, I'm going to be able to see all of these when you guys are going to be able to see all of them, so it's not a big deal. These dice here are going to be representing life totals, so we'll be dealing with that in a second. Oop. And of course, we don't need those anymore. And there you go. So there you go. You deal out all the rolls face down, and you can look at them, but don't reveal them yet. Even if you're the heroine, you do not reveal them just yet. The next step is, of course, you need to shuffle all the character cards and pick a character. Now, the way this works is you deal out 2 face down to every player, and only they can look at it, and they pick one and put the other one face down away from everyone else. So the way I'm going to go ahead and do this is... I'm actually going to go ahead and do this off screen. Well, actually, I'll do one on screen, I guess. So let's say we'll deal it out to myself first. So 1, 2. So I get to pick between Atsuo or Tenchi. Each character has 2 abilities. One is usually a passive ability that's just done in response to various effects. So, for example, for Atsuo, she can discard 2 cards to immediately activate her spell card, but she can only do it once per round, just like usual. And then her spell card, which is the second card there, is what it does. So she can discard 2 cards to activate her Nuclear Excursion. What Nuclear Excursion does is she picks a target that's in range and attacks that player 3 times, but she loses 1 life as a result. So she triple attacks, but loses a life as a cost, because you know she's a nuclear reactor. Tenchi, on the other hand, is whenever she loses life, she draws an additional card each time she loses it. Or sorry, every time she loses life, she draws an additional card, along with the card she usually draws when you take damage, which I'll get more into later. Her special spell card is Sword Swagger, which is she gains 1 life, but it can't go above max life, and then she chooses another player regardless of range. And starting with that player, you and the chosen player take turns discarding Danmaku cards until 1 player passes. The player that passes loses 1 life, and it does not count as an attack, which is a key thing here. So for this playthrough, I'll probably keep it simple and just play. I'll be playing as Atsuo. So for this, I'll be putting this face down in front of me, and this will go back into the pot, go right there, because it's going to be discarded. So let me be right back, and we will deal out all these cards and continue onwards. Alright, so I went ahead and made my choices. Now, during this, as you're trying to make your decision, you can look at your roll card. Just don't reveal it to anyone else. Granted, I kind of picked most of them without looking, but it actually kind of worked out after I looked at all the rolls. Any character cards that are not being used are set over here. And now we reveal our characters all at the same time. So that's what we're going to do. So we obviously, I'm going to refer to all these characters by color, because that's just easier. So we have some spares. It looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, that's right. Okay. So for white player, obviously we got Atsuo. Pink is going to be Patchouli. Purple is going to be Sakia. Blue will be Yuka. guess I should probably reveal some of these abilities. So Patchouli, her special abilities is her max hand size is 7 instead of just 5. And when she starts the game, she starts with 7 cards in her hand. And her her spell card is she draws 2 cards and deals damage to a player in range. Most of the spell cards will do at least one damage to a player, as well as one additional effect, or it just does a lot of damage. Sakya she can actually play multiple additional Danmaku cards per round. Usually you're limited to 1 Danmaku per round, with the exception of certain cards that will increase that number. Sakya starts out being able to attack 3 times a round, which is rather powerful. And her special spell card is an actual counter ability. You might notice that if you look at Patchy's beside the Philosopher's Stone, there's the little card symbol and an arrow symbol. The card symbol represents it's a spell card. The arrow represents that it's an action card. It's a directed action. A angled arrow like this is a reaction card, which means you can only do it in reaction to something else. As you can see, yeah, it even states it there where it says additional arrow action cards. That means that straight arrows are action cards. Anyway, so the world, what it does is you activate this whenever a player is attacked. So whenever a player is attacked, that's when she can actually use her spell card. That player will automatically avoid the attack, and then you attack the attacker regardless of range, and no additional action cards may not be played this turn. This turn being that player's turn that you just activated. Yuka, her special ability is every time she damages a player, she draws a card, which means she can keep her hand full of cards. And the reflowering Gensokyo is she attacks all players, regardless of range. Alright, Cerno. Cerno has +2 range. We'll go into range in a bit. Players at a distance of 1 from Cerno are not considered in range if there are 2 or more players. She may still attack a player by going around in a circle. So this means that characters that are right next to her, such as Yuka and whoever Yellow is, Cerno cannot directly attack them unless she gets a lot of extra range. Usually, for most characters, they start with a range of 1, which means usually the people they can only interact with are their neighbors. In the case of Cerno, she has to actually interact with, looks like, let's see, what, +2 range? So it could be Sakya, Patchouli, and whoever orange and red are. Her special spell card is Perfect Freeze. Attack a player in range, they must skip their next turn. Players cannot skip 2 turns in a row, but you may still target them. So you can't just stack them, you can't just lock them out. Besides that, we have, for yellow player, we have Alice. Alice, special ability is whenever she gets hit, she doesn't actually lose power-up cards. Anyone that's played a Touhou game knows that, when you get killed, you will lose your power-ups. There's a similar mechanic in this game, but in the case of Alice, she ignores that. Also, during her turn, she can discard item cards she controls from play to activate her spell card. But you can only do it once per round, just like with Atsuo. Her special spell card is she flips cards from the top of the deck until you reveal an item card, then put that card into play, put all other cards revealed this way into the discard pile, and then she attacks a player in range. So she can hit somebody and pretty much automatically get an item card. Then finally, for orange, we have... Or sorry, not finally, because they're still red. We have Yukari, Yakumo. When Yukari avoids an attack, she may attack a player in range. So if she manages to avoid getting hit, she can counter. And then her special ability is Yakumo's Yukari's Spirited Away. Choose any player, you may look at their hand, then either take a card of your choice from it, or take an item card that player controls in play, so she can steal items. And then she attacks that player if they're in range. So she can actually pick any target, but if she's not in range, she won't do any damage. Alright, and then finally, for red, we have Aya. Aya's special ability is she can discard Danmaku cards to cancel other Danmaku cards. So essentially, she's taking out bullets with her own bullets. Her spell card is Wind God Girl, which reveal the top 5 cards of the deck, place any Danmaku cards revealed this way into your hand and the rest into the discard pile, and then you attack a player in range. So yeah. So notice that some of the beneficial effects of the spell card are sometimes like weird support abilities, but all of them always have that same thing where they at least attack once. Alright? Now that is, everyone's been revealed. Now this was going to be revealed all at the same time, and now we got to deal with this. Alright, so first things first, we're going to go ahead and, what actually I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and turn on, I'm going to turn off hands. Hiding, apply. Yep, okay. So that's all I need to know. So let's put these all in the hand, so I can actually have some room, like so. Okay, all this gets put away, and these just get put off to the side. Okay, so at this point, we now need to get the other cards ready. So we just need to shuffle the main deck, which is all these cards. The main deck consists of all the cards that we're going to be using throughout the game and drawing. So, alright, all done. And then this is the incident deck, which we'll talk about in a bit, which we'll put right here. Okay. Next. Pretty straightforward. Alright, next we said everyone start, after each player has the card. Okay, so after we've dealt out all the character cards, set up the deck, this is when the heroine would reveal herself. So out of these people, Alice, Yukari, Aya, Atsuo, Pacholi, Sakia, Yuka, and Cerno. You want to guess who the heroine is? No, you're wrong. It's Cerno. So Cerno is the heroine. So she revealed herself. And she now has plot armor, which means she gets an additional starting life. And yeah, that'll set it up. All players have a starting life of 4, except for the heroine who starts with 5. So 5, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4. Just trying to be consistent here. 4, and of course Cerno starts with 5. Now she starts out revealed, so everyone knows that she is the heroine. So anyone that happens to be a boss and things like that will know who their target is. Now, even partners, like even people that are supposed to be allied with the heroine, they can't verbally tell the player that, hey, I'm your ally. That's a very important part about this game is secrecy. You can't just flat out talk about what your role you are. Even if you do something that can reveal what another character is, such as the heroine swapping roles with someone else, it's generally bad taste to go ahead and just start saying, oh, this person is this and this. The way you're supposed to figure out who is who in this is supposed to be through their actions and behaviors. You can even decide, even their character pick can help decide what sort of person they may be. For example, Sakia tends to have a very supportive spell card because she can help protect other people. So this could lean towards Sakia being potentially an ally, or at least someone that's willing to keep you alive a bit longer. But for other characters, they might just want to see the world burn. Anyway, so all that's been set up. Next, we have to do the starting hand. All players have a starting hand and max hand size of 4 cards, except for the heroine, who has 5, and of course any other characters that have any other requirements. For example, Pacholi has a max hand size of 7. So I'm going to go ahead and shuffle this one more time. This is the part where we need to deal out cards to everybody. So we're just going to go 1, 2, 3, and 4. There you go. Alright, all cards have been dealt out. Everyone starts with 4, except for the heroine, who starts with 5, and Pacholi, who specifically states that she starts with 7 cards. Alright, and at this point, we can start the game. But before we go ahead and start the game, I want to go ahead and go over a little bit about the cards. So I'm going to go ahead and flip some of these. How do we flip? Wrong buttons. There. So there are multiple types of cards in this game. There are, of course, action cards, which are based off that little arrow there. That little fireball icon there represents a Danmaku card. Danmaku cards are pretty much your bread and butter as far as doing damage to other players. It states exactly what you do with it. It's you attack a player in range. Now the additional effect of the shoot card is, now the shoot card is pretty much your standard Danmaku card. There's a couple of other Danmaku cards, but the primary one, the generic one, is the shoot card. Now what this shoot card can do is you can discard multiple Danmaku cards to give it additional range. So for example, Cerno has a range of 3. All characters have a range of 1 plus their modifiers. So Cerno is 1 plus 2 is 3. Now usually this means she can attack anyone within 3 from where she's sitting. So for example, Yuka's 1 away, Saki is 2 away, Patchouli is 3 away. Atsuo is 4 away, Alice is 1, Yukari is 2, Aya is 3. So she can attack pretty much everyone except for Atsuo, and because of her special requirement where she can't attack someone that's 1 distance away, she cannot attack Alice or Yukari. But if she were to play this card and then discard a Danmaku card, her range is now 4 for this shot, which means she can actually reach all the way to Atsuo. And that's generally how it works. Now, it says in the italics there, by default you can only play 1 Danmaku card per round. So very much like, I guess the closest thing you can match it to is in Yu-Gi-Oh! You can generally only summon 1 monster per round. Now granted, there's things that can increase that number, and that's the same thing for this game. So in this game, you can only shoot. You can only Danmaku once per round. But if you have special abilities, such as Saki has additional 2 shots, Saki can actually do 3 shoots a round if she wants to. Granted, she has to have those cards in her hand and all that good stuff. Now some other cards to go ahead and point out. You have some that are just plain action cards, such as Correndo. So all this does is just an action card. You can play as many action cards as you want as long as you meet their requirements. So for example, you can do a shoot and you can do a Correndo. Then there are item cards. Item cards are represented by that little treasure box icon. The little shield icon represents that it's a defense card. Now, defense cards are items, but you can only have 1 defense card in play at a time. Now, if you play another defense card, you can discard the other one. So you can always filter them out. And if you were to play this card, you would just put it out in front of you, and that'll show that it's active. So for this, it'll actually mean she gets additional distance. Now, what distance does is, for example, Yuka is 1 distance away from Cerno, because we already went over how that works. But if you have this out, her distance is now 3 from Yuka. Now she's 4 away from Sakia. Now distance is purely for when people are shooting at her. Cerno could still shoot at everyone else as normal. Her increasing her distance doesn't mean that she can't hit Sakia anymore or anything like that. It's purely when people are shooting at her. So if she plays at focus, it's now going to be a lot harder for other characters to shoot at her, which is pretty useful. Now, let's go ahead and see if we can find some other cards to point out. That's just a Grimoire, that's just an action card. There's another shoot card. This is Seal Away. This is also a Danmaku card, but it's not a shoot card. You choose a player and you force them to discard an item card. Or sorry, you force that player to discard an item card of your choice that player controls. So, for example, if Cerno had Focus out, Alice can go, well, I'm going to go ahead and target you first, because that's completely fine. And then, so yeah, it says you choose a player. It doesn't matter distance in this point. You choose the player, you force her to discard this card, and then it says you can attack that player if they're in range. So not only does it force someone to discard the card, if they happen to be in range, you shoot at them, essentially. So, pretty straightforward. Now, there's a few more other cards I want to point out before we start going over rounds. Spiritual Attack. Spiritual Attack is kind of your default bomb card. Now, sorry, not your bomb card. This is your spell card thing. Now, if you look on that little symbol that's like the 6-pointed star, that represents I believe it's a spell card. Let me check real quick. Okay, sorry about that. So yeah, what that symbol represents is Invocation. So this is an Invocation card. What Invocation cards usually mean is they allow you to activate your spell card. Now, note it says you can only activate 1 spell card per round. So you can do 1 Danmaku per round and 1 spell card per round. Period. There are some ways to get around that, but it's in general that's the rule. So you can actually shoot somebody, and if you happen to have spiritual attack, you can also essentially bomb them. So, alright, power. So this is an item card, and it has a power-up symbol on it. So that little P there represents that this is a power-up card. So power-up cards, very much just like defense cards, you equip them, but you can actually equip as many as you want. And the way what power does is it increases your range by 1, and lets you shoot and allow you to do 1 additional Danmaku card each round. So in the case of Yukari, with 1 power out, she can actually now shoot twice, or activate 2 Danmaku cards per round, and she has a range of 2, which means she can now hit Alice, Cerno, Aya, and Atsuo. Now the catch about power-up cards is anytime you get wounded, every time you lose a life to an attack, doesn't matter how much life, as long as you lose at least 1, you have to discard a power-up card. Now that's what the key thing about Alice's ability is she ignores this effect. But if Yukari was to get wounded, she would have to discard this card. And then she'll be back to 1 Danmaku and 1 range. Alright, so that's pretty straightforward. Let's go ahead and take a look at these. Shoot, shoot, shoot. Bomb. Okay, so this is an invocation card. It can also be used as a counter card, so you can pick and choose. So if you use it as an invocation card, it's just like a spiritual attack. It just activates a spell card, that's it. But if you use it as a counter card, you can actually cancel a Danmaku card or cancel a spell card. So it could be just like in the actual Toho games, you can use bombs as defensive bombs. Mini Hakuro is an item card that is an artifact. That little symbol there, the Hakuro symbol there, represents an artifact. Now, the only thing about artifacts is they're pretty much just like defense card. You can only have 1 active at a time. If you play another one, you have to discard it. So, pretty straightforward. So this is all the artifact cards are very powerful. It's even recommended on the top right that you remove them if you're playing a 4-player game. Usually I keep them in anyway because they're pretty interesting. But as you can see, they're very powerful. So this thing gives a range of +3, and you can discard 2 cards to activate your spell card. So you can just discard any 2 cards, which gives a lot more flexibility. Alright, well, Atsuo is starting out with all the Grace cards. So this is a counter card. So you can see that little diagonal arrow. That represents that it's a reaction card. And then this is a... One moment. Just making sure I got the term correct. I wish they put a little bit... Yeah, these are just called dodge cards. So yeah, that symbol, that little... I think it's a figure on top of a angled laser or something? I don't know. That second symbol there to the bottom left is the... represents it's a dodging card. Play this when you are attacked, you avoid the attack. You may discard a Danmaku card to play this on behalf of another player. So you can actually use graze to protect other players. So this is another way to protect other characters, such as the heroine. So if Sarno is getting blasted and I wanted to protect her, I would have to discard a Danmaku card and a graze. Now in the case of Atsuo, obviously I don't have any of those, so it doesn't really matter. Alright. Okay, spiritual attack. This is just another artifact card. Defense card. This is just an action card. And some more action cards. So yeah, pretty straightforward. Each of these are kind of unique, but I'm not going to go over the details yet. Let's see. Capture spell card. Okay, so this is, I'm going to go ahead and talk about this one. This is an invocation card, but what this does is you choose another player and activate their spell card as if it were your own. You still are limited to the 1 spell card per round, but this is a situation where you can activate someone else's ability. So for example, Sakuya could be like, alright, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and steal Nuclear Excursion and blast someone for 3 damage. Now granted, she would still lose the 1 life and all that good stuff, but this is a pretty powerful card. Anyway, there's also the 1-up card. The little heart symbol represents this as a way to restore life. It's one of the only ways to restore life, almost. Choose a player. That player gains 1 life. You cannot go above your max life. So you can actually play this on other players, besides yourself. Or you can play it as a reaction ability if a player has ever reduced the 0 life and return them to 1 life. This is almost like death bombing. Alright, and then let's see if there's any other fancy cards to point out. Melee is a very unique Danmaku card. It specifically says it does not count against your Danmaku limit, and essentially it changes the fight into a brawl. So if I play this on like Cerno, it will attack the player regardless of range. So I can attack anyone. I could be like, all right, I target Aya, and Aya could negate it, or she can take it. If she takes it, she can choose to discard a Danmaku card to do melee back at Yuka. So it's a very, very hostile attack type card because you're essentially just trading hits until someone gives. Now, granted, you can still graze. So you can be like, all right, well, I attack, and then she attacks. She discards, counters back. I graze, and then I can then choose to discard another Danmaku card to throw it back at her. So you got a few options. Melees, there's only like one melee in the deck, so if you have it, it's definitely a very brutal attack. Alright, there are a few other cards to talk about, I think, but they're pretty straightforward. Most of them are just like, most of them are going to be like cards we've already seen, but there's a few that are like, alright, this is a Danmaku card that ignores grazing, or it ignores range, and things like that. Now, there's one more aspect about the cards that I haven't really talked about yet, and it's in the top left corner. In the top left corner, you can see a little sun symbol. That's the season it represents. So just to kind of show off, there's a winter card. This is a winter season card, so you can see the snowflake there. There's a autumn, a fall, or sorry, that's spring, and a summer. Usually this doesn't mean anything by itself, but there are situations where certain cards will be required to handle certain incidents, or if for certain characters, if you're getting hit with a certain attack, they may be able to negate it, or it might do something, some other added benefits. So that's just to be aware of. So even though a lot of these cards are exactly the same, all these are 4 grazes, they're each a different season, which can influence which ones you decide to play out in this situation. All right. Now, the way this so for this particular game, I guess I'll just see how things go from here. But we're already kind of going pretty long. But what we're going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and play the very first turn, which is going to be with Cerno. The heroine does go first, so this doesn't change anything. Now, here's the steps for the turn. There's the start of the turn. Start of the turn just represents any effects that last until your next turn. That's when this is the phase where it ends. Any limits such as Danmaku shots and spell cards reset at this phase as well. Then it's the incident step. At the beginning of the incident step, you check the current incident. If there are no incident in play, the current player puts the top card of the incident deck into play, and the incident takes effect immediately and lasts until resolved. So we're going to go ahead and shuffle this. This is the incident deck here. Worldly Desires. When this incident enters play, all players discard all item cards in play. If a player would play an item card, they discard it instead. So all item cards would be automatically discarded at this point. And then anyone that plays an item card, instead of it going into play, it gets discarded. This will stay into effect until the resolution is met. Now, the way the resolution is met is it says it usually means usually the requirement is certain card types. Some of the card types could be a certain season, such as the seasons I mentioned before, summer, autumn, etc. But in the case of Worldly Desires, the resolution requirement is item cards. So until a total of 4 cards are collected, no one can use items. Now, something to note about this, the way a incident collects cards is anytime a card is supposed to go into the discard but is a requirement for an incident, instead of it being put into the discard pile, it's put into collection. So for example, if I were to play Focus, it would be discarded because of the effect, but instead of going into the discard pile, it'll just go over here with Worldly Desires, and that'll add to the pile. Once all 4 cards are put into the pile, it will resolve it, and once it's resolved, this will just get discarded. So you know what? We're just going to put this there and put that there. Okay, so now for Cerno, I was planning her first turn to be Focus and just, give her some defense, but it looks like that's not an option. One thing I can do is I can play Correndo. As you play this card, you may discard any number of cards from your hand. Draw cards equal to the number of cards discarded this way plus 1. So just playing this card by itself, you would at least get 1 card, which is usually just Correndo. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and play Correndo, and I'm going to go ahead and discard all my shoot cards. So with this, I get to draw 4 cards. Oh wait, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. My apologies. So that incident step came into play, took effect. Next is the draw step. The player draws cards for their turn. By default, players draw 2 cards per turn. So I actually get to draw 2 cards first, like so. Okay. Now I can actually, now's the main step. This is when I can actually shoot people and do my thing. Now, as the heroine, I don't know who anyone is. In fact, I haven't even showed you guys what it is, except for the mistakes I did when I accidentally flipped some cards. So I can go ahead and shoot somebody if I really want to. But at this point, the only reason I would shoot anyone is because I'm worried that it's usually just based off their character and thinking their character is very dangerous. So not very many options here. I think I'm going to go ahead and shoot at Yukari. So Yukari, now remember, Sarno has a range of 3. I can't target Yuka or Alice because they're right next to me. But I can shoot at Yukari, so because she's 2 distance away. So Yukari doesn't actually have any defense cards, so she's just going to end up taking 1 damage unless someone decides to protect her, which for the most part I don't think anyone will. But I'm going to go ahead and take a look at my cards. Okay. Is there anyone else that can graze for another person? Funnily enough, no. So, yeah. Alright, well, that means she's just going to go down to 3 life, and that's it. Now, whenever you get wounded from a card, every time you take damage from an effect, that character draws a card. This is to prevent situations where you have no cards in your hand and someone just decides to unload on you. Now, granted, having no cards in your hand is still pretty vulnerable, but at least every time you get hit, you can draw a card and hopefully draw a Graze to save your butt. Okay, so that was my 1 Danmaku per round, and now I'm going to go ahead and play Correndo. And I'm going to discard the rest of my shoot cards. Okay, so this is going to give me 4 cards, because I discarded 3 cards plus 1, so 4 cards go back in my hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright. So now I could now I will have to discard a card if I finish my turn as is. So tell you what, I'm gonna go ahead and play Focus. And since that Worldly Desires is in play, it's just going to get discarded, and since it's an item card, it's going to get collected. Alright, so now we're 1/4 of the way of completing that instant. Okay, and then after the main step, you go through the discard step. If you have, now during the discard step, all players discard back down to their max hand size. So in the case of Yukari, who's now at 5 cards, she actually needs to discard a card. So I'm going to go ahead and discard. I'm going to go ahead and discard a shoot card. There you go. So yeah, this is something I tend to forget a lot, but yeah, whenever any player ends their turn, all players have to discard down to their hand size. So there's situations where multiple characters might get a lot of cards in the same turn, outside their turn, but they can't just hold on to it. Alright, so with all that said and done, I'm going to go ahead and call it here. When we come back, I will continue playing this through and just seeing what happens. As always, it's probably going to be a little bit boring because it's just me by myself, but I wanted to go ahead and show off this game a little bit. So, I am the Depressed Eeyore, and this was Danmaku. See you guys later.